Welcome to the Star Past channel. Old photos that stayed hidden in the archives for years. Are you ready to see them? Please feel free to like and subscribe.
In 1928, Hollywood superstar Clara Bow was photographed in connection with The Fleet's Inn, an important Paramount production from the silent film era, which was released on September 15, 1928. At the time, Bow was already known as the It Girl and was one of Paramount's biggest stars. Interestingly, Richard Arlen really did co-star with Clara Bow that same year, but not in The Fleet's Inn. The two appeared together in Ladies of the Mob. The dog in the photograph is identified as Scotty, adding an unusually personal touch to this glimpse of 1920s Hollywood. The Fleet's Inn followed a young woman named Peaches Dean, who worked at a dance hall in San Francisco and became involved in a romance with a sailor. Today, the film is considered lost, meaning no complete surviving copy is known to exist, making photographs connected to its production even more valuable. Perhaps the most fascinating part is this: we can still see Clara Bow at the height of her fame, even though the film associated with this moment has almost completely vanished from history.
This photograph was taken in 1931, showing Jean Harlow between takes while filming The Beast of the City at MGM Studios in Culver City, California. Harlow played Daisy Stevens in the film, which was eventually released on February 13, 1932. The movie was made during Hollywood's famous pre-code era, when films had not yet been subjected to the strict censorship that followed a few years later. Interestingly, the project was originally developed under the working title City Sentinels and focused on organized crime and a police officer's fight against gangsters. At the time, Harlow was rapidly becoming one of Hollywood's biggest stars, making 1931 an important year in her career. Perhaps the most remarkable fact is that Jean Harlow lived only 26 years, dying in 1937. Yet she remains one of the most recognizable icons of classic Hollywood. So this is more than a behind-the-scenes photograph. It captures a brief moment in the life of a star who would become a lasting symbol of Hollywood's golden age.
This photograph was taken in 1932 during the filming of Three on a Match at Santa Monica Beach, California, featuring Bette Davis and Joan Blondell together. The film was produced by Warner Bros., directed by Mervyn LeRoy, and released on October 29, 1932. The story follows three old friends whose lives become entangled again, eventually leading to drugs, gangsters, and the kidnapping of a child. The cast also included Anne Dvorak and Humphrey Bogart, and the film became a striking example of the bold pre-code Hollywood era. Remarkably, the kidnapping storyline appeared in the same year that the Lindbergh baby kidnapping shocked America, adding even more sensitivity to the film's subject matter. At the time, Bette Davis had not yet become a major Hollywood legend, but only a few years later, she won her first Academy Award for Best Actress. Perhaps the most fascinating part is that this simple behind-the-scenes photograph captured two future Hollywood icons at a moment when no one yet knew their names would still be remembered decades later.
This photograph was taken in 1932, showing Lillian Harvey, the British-German film star, during one of the peak periods of her career. Born in London, Harvey became one of the most popular stars of Germany's UFA studio system and was known for performing in several languages. Around this time, she appeared alongside Cicely Kortnich in Happy Ever After, filmed at the Babelsberg Studios in Berlin. Interestingly, the movie was the English-language version of Ein blonder Traum, with German, English, and French versions produced around the same time. Harvey soon moved toward Hollywood, appearing in 4 American films between 1933 and 1935, although they failed to achieve the success expected of her. World War II changed the course of her life, and she later lived in France, where she also spent time working with the Red Cross. Perhaps the most fascinating part is that this image captures Harvey during the period when she was still one of Europe's biggest stars, before her remarkable journey took her from London to Berlin, Hollywood, and eventually France. This photograph was taken in 1936 behind the scenes of the controversial film Klondike Annie, showing Mae West discussing a scene with director Raoul Walsh before filming. West played the Frisco doll, Rose Carlton, a woman who takes the identity of a dead missionary and becomes involved in a story filled with crime, religion, and scandal. Produced by Paramount Pictures, the film was released on February 21, 1936, and became one of West's most controversial movies of the decade. Its provocative story pushed against the moral standards of the time, and several parts of the film faced censorship under Hollywood's strict production code. Reports indicate that around 8 minutes were removed from the original version, with some deleted scenes later becoming lost. Mae West was more than just the star. She also had an important role in shaping her script and dialogue, giving her unusual creative influence at the time. This behind-the-scenes photograph captures a moment from a film that helps explain why Mae West became one of the boldest, most controversial, and independent female stars of 1930s Hollywood.
This 1936 photograph shows 8-year-old Shirley Temple taking a short break during a busy day of filming. She had started working in films at the age of 3 and had already become one of Hollywood's most famous child stars. From 1935 to 1938, Shirley was the top box office star in the United States for 4 consecutive years, an achievement many adult stars never reached. In 1935, at just 7 years old, she received a special honorary Academy Award, becoming the youngest recipient of the honor at the time. 20th Century Fox built an entire system around her career, including studio schooling, special accommodations, and a large team of writers working on her projects. Her popularity went far beyond movies, with dolls, clothing, and numerous commercial products being sold using her image. What makes her story even more remarkable is that she eventually left Hollywood and became an American diplomat and ambassador, taking a path far beyond that of an ordinary movie star. This 1954 photograph captures Rosemary Clooney and Bing Crosby behind the scenes of the classic musical film White Christmas. Directed by Michael Curtis, the movie also starred Danny Kaye and Vera Ellen in the leading roles. Principal photography took place in 1953, with much of the production filmed on Hollywood studio sets, including Paramount. White Christmas was Paramount's first film produced using VistaVision, a new technology designed to deliver a wider and more detailed image. The famous song White Christmas, written by Irving Berlin, became one of the defining musical highlights of the film. Clooney and Crosby's professional relationship also continued beyond this movie, leading to further musical collaborations. Today, this behind-the-scenes photograph captures a fascinating moment from the golden age of Hollywood, when major stars, memorable music, and new filmmaking technology came together to create a lasting Christmas classic. In 1955, Elizabeth Taylor was photographed behind the scenes of Giant, doing something surprisingly personal, applying her own makeup. Directed by George Stevens and starring Elizabeth Taylor, Rock Hudson, and James Dean, the film became one of the major productions of 1950s Hollywood. A large part of the movie was filmed around Marfa, Texas, where the remote location and intense heat made production challenging. Even the massive mansion seen in the story was not entirely real. Its exterior was constructed and transported to Texas in several railroad cars. The film later gained even greater historical importance because it was James Dean's final major film before his death in a car accident. What looks like a simple moment in front of a mirror actually captures a small piece of the making of one of Hollywood's most memorable films. Why do you think a star as famous as Elizabeth Taylor preferred to do her own makeup on set?
In 1955, Alfred Hitchcock was photographed with Grace Kelly during the production of To Catch a Thief, much of which was filmed on location in the south of France. Kelly played Frances Stevens,
opposite Cary Grant as a retired jewel thief known as the Cat. Principal photography took place from May 31 to September 4, 1954, while the finished film was released in 1955. Cannes, Nice, Monaco, Saint-Jeannet, and other locations along the French Riviera became important filming sites. The movie was the third and final collaboration between Hitchcock and Grace Kelly, and later became a classic of Hollywood cinema. Hitchcock also used the real landscapes of the Riviera to give the film its distinctive atmosphere and visual appeal. This photograph captures a rare behind-the-scenes moment, showing the legendary director and his leading star together between scenes. In 1955, Natalie Wood and James Dean were photographed together on the set of Rebel Without a Cause, a film that became an enduring symbol of rebellious American youth. Wood was only 16 during production, but she was already a veteran actress who had started working in Hollywood as a child. Dean was 24, and this film, along with his two other major movies, helped turn him into an enduring icon of young America. The film was directed by Nicholas Ray and explored teenagers struggling with family, society, and their own sense of identity. The tragic twist is that Dean died in a car crash in September 1955, only weeks after the film was released. Wood died many years later, in 1981, after an incident near California's Catalina Island, whose circumstances have remained the subject of public debate. That makes this more than a behind-the-scenes photograph. It captures two young stars who would soon become permanent legends of Hollywood history.
In 1956, Audrey Hepburn was photographed in character as Natasha Rostova while filming War and Peace. The film was a cinematic adaptation of Leo Tolstoy's famous novel, with much of the production filmed in Italy. Hepburn starred alongside her husband, Mel Ferrer, who played Prince Andrei Bolkonsky. What makes this photo especially interesting is that even between takes, Hepburn can be seen sketching and working in her notebook. For the role, she had to recreate the world of 19th century Russia and portray Natasha's journey through love, war, and social change. One lesser-known fact: the film was made on a budget of around $6 million and had a theatrical runtime of more than 3 hours. Despite receiving considerable attention and success, it was not as financially successful as expected. Henry Fonda was also among the film's notable stars. Do you think this photo captures the real Audrey Hepburn or a glimpse of the Natasha she created for the film?
In 1956, Lauren Bacall and Gregory Peck were photographed beside the pool at the famous Beverly Hills Hotel while filming Designing Woman. Directed by Vincente Minnelli, the film was released in 1957 and tells the story of a sports writer and a successful fashion designer whose very different worlds collide. Bacall played fashion designer Marilla Brown, while Peck portrayed sports writer Mike Hagan, creating one of the film's central on-screen pairings. The Beverly Hills Hotel and its pool were among Hollywood's iconic locations, making them a fitting setting for a production featuring two major stars of the era. One lesser-known detail about the film is the studio's obsession with its costumes. Costume designer Helen Rose created 132 outfits for the movie, more than one costume for every minute of its 118-minute runtime. Designing Woman became one of the notable romantic comedies of the 1950s, with Bacall and Peck at the heart of the story. Do you think this photograph feels more like a scene from the movie or a genuine off-camera moment between two Hollywood stars? In 1940, Ava Gardner was not yet a Hollywood star and was only about 18 years old. Remarkably, just a year later, her life would change completely after she signed a 7-year contract with MGM. This photograph comes from the period when Gardner's beauty was beginning to attract the attention of photographers and Hollywood studios, with beach images later becoming part of her early publicity. Her famous discovery actually began with a photograph taken by her brother-in-law, Larry Tarr, which he displayed in the window of his photography studio in New York. During her first screen test, Gardner's strong Southern accent was such a problem that MGM filmed her in a silent test, but the camera clearly loved her. She eventually signed with MGM for $50 a week on a 7-year contract, marking the beginning of her transformation inside Hollywood's demanding star-making system. The controversial part? In her early years, the studio often relied more on her beauty and sex appeal for publicity photographs than on her acting ability. So, do you see this as a photograph of a young woman before fame, or the moment Hollywood was beginning to create Ava Gardner? This photo dates to 1955, when John F. Kennedy was not yet president, but was serving as a U.S. Senator from Massachusetts, while Jacqueline was still years away from becoming First Lady. The couple is seen playing tennis at the Kennedy family's summer home in Hyannisport, Massachusetts, a place that would later become closely associated with the Kennedy family. What makes the image especially interesting is that only a few years later, this young senator would become president, turning their private lives into a subject of worldwide fascination. At the time, Kennedy's political career was rapidly gaining momentum, while his 1953 marriage to Jacqueline had already made them one of America's most talked about young couples. For the Kennedys, Hyannisport was more than a vacation destination. Several members of the family owned nearby properties, making the area an important gathering place for them. So this photograph captures more than a casual tennis match. It preserves a glimpse of the private life of a couple before they entered the most famous chapter of their lives. In 1949, Elizabeth Taylor was photographed riding a horse on the beach when she was still only about 16 or 17 years old and transitioning from a child actress into a young Hollywood star. Having entered the film industry as a child, she was beginning to move toward more mature roles, while the studios were already shaping her future as a major star. At this point, Taylor had not yet reached the worldwide fame she would achieve later, but her private life was already beginning to attract Hollywood attention. Interestingly, her connection with horses had already been seen in the film National Velvet, an important movie from her teenage years. In 1949, Taylor was appearing in notable projects such as Conspirator and Little Women, and her rise to stardom was gaining momentum. Only a few years later, she would become one of Hollywood's most famous and controversial figures, with a personal life and marriages that repeatedly made headlines. In 1963, Julie Christie was photographed by the River Thames in London at a time when a new generation of British female stars was beginning to emerge. She was only around 22 years old and had not yet become an international star, but that same year she landed one of her breakthrough roles in Billy Liar, directed by John Schlesinger. Interestingly, her casting was partly accidental. Another actress had originally been chosen for the role of Liz, but had to leave the production because of illness, opening the door for Christie. Just 2 years later, her performance in Darling earned her the Academy Award for Best Actress, making her one of the defining faces of 1960s British cinema at only 24. Her role as Lara in Dr. Zhivago soon transformed her into an international star and cemented her image as one of the most distinctive actresses of the era. What makes her story even more interesting is that Christie was never completely comfortable with Sutton's celebrity, and later spoke about how uncomfortable she felt when the media image of her was mistaken for her real personality. Carole Lombard was one of Hollywood's biggest comedy stars of the 1930s and early 1940s, and this portrait captures the glamorous image associated with her career. She became one of the leading stars of screwball comedy through films such as 20th Century, My Man Godfrey, and Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Her private life was just as fascinating, especially after her 1939 marriage to Clark Gable made them one of Hollywood's most famous couples. But behind the glamorous image was a tragic ending. Lombard died in a plane crash in January 1942 at just 33 years old. She was returning from a war bond tour when the aircraft crashed near Las Vegas, Nevada. Her final film, To Be or Not to Be, was released after her death and later became one of the most respected films of her career. In 1939, Vivien Leigh played Vivian Scarlett O'Hara, while Hattie McDaniel portrayed Mammy in the legendary film Gone with the Wind. The movie became one of classic Hollywood's biggest productions, but its romanticized portrayal of slavery and the American South later sparked serious criticism. McDaniel made history with her performance, becoming the first Black actor to win an Academy Award in 1940. Yet, behind that historic achievement was painful racial discrimination. She was even barred from attending the film's Atlanta premiere with the rest of the cast. Interestingly, Mammy is one of the few characters in the story who can speak to Scarlett honestly and even openly criticize her. So this image is more than a behind-the-scenes moment. It captures two actresses inside a film that represented both a major Hollywood triumph and a deeply controversial legacy. If Hattie McDaniel could see the film's legacy today, do you think she would see her achievement more as a historic victory or as a reminder of the discrimination of her era?
This photo shows Marilyn Monroe and Jack Lemmon during the production of Some Like It Hot in 1959, one of the most celebrated comedies in film history. Lemmon played Jerry, a musician who disguises himself as a woman named Daphne to escape trouble. What makes the picture especially interesting is that Lemmon spent much of the movie appearing on screen in full women's clothing, turning his disguise into one of the film's biggest sources of comedy. Monroe played Sugarcane, a singer who becomes caught up in the chaotic scheme involving Jerry and Joe, played by Tony Curtis. Directed by Billy Wilder, the film went on to become one of Hollywood's most enduring classic comedies. Behind the scenes, Lemmon became so committed to his Daphne character that Wilder sometimes worried the performance was becoming almost too convincing. Looking at this photograph without knowing the story, it is hard to believe that the woman standing beside Marilyn Monroe is actually Jack Lemmon, one of the greatest comedians of classic Hollywood.
This photo was taken in 1953, behind the scenes of How to Marry a Millionaire, bringing together three major Hollywood stars, Betty Grable, Lauren Bacall, and Marilyn Monroe. Directed by Jean Negulesco, the film follows three women who set out to find wealthy husbands, with each actress playing one of the central characters. Monroe played Paula Debevoise, Bacall played Shatsay Page, and Grable played Loco Dempsey. What makes the photo especially interesting is that Marilyn was still at the beginning of her rise to superstardom, while Grable and Bacall were already firmly established Hollywood names. The film was also one of the major early productions made using CinemaScope, making its wide, colorful presentation a major attraction for audiences at the time. Together, the three actresses represented three different stages of Hollywood stardom: Grable from the older generation, Bacall as an established star, and Monroe as the newcomer about to explode onto the scene.